welcome to the Intuitively Wild podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Levine. Living intuitively wild is about coming back home to ourselves. Here we talk about how to live connected to ourselves, others, and nature, and make a commitment to radical authenticity, vulnerability, and acceptance. On this podcast, we delve into a wide range of topics that span the human experience. We peel back the layers and talk about the things that are often not talked about. This is a space for us all to walk and wander this path of life together. Let's dig into our roots and go deep. Hello, happy Wednesday. Welcome back to this week's episode. I am so excited to introduce my guest, Lindsey Walker. Lindsey is an intuitive root cause practitioner who focuses on guiding people to heal the root cause of their health challenges in her practice, Soul Fam Wellness. She fell into the world of health and wellness by way of her own health challenges many years ago. And when traditional medicine missed the mark for her healing, she turned to holistic health, which finally moved the needle in a positive direction. However, she still felt like something was missing. Out of desperation, Lindsey began exploring the world of emotional releases and energy work, which began a cascade of deep and powerful healing that she didn't expect and couldn't deny. Now a certified nutritional therapy practitioner and professional intuitive reader and healer, Lindsey guides her clients to intuitively heal themselves on a physical, emotional, and spiritual level. She believes there's always a root cause for why people experience health challenges. Sometimes you need a full-on toxin detox, and other times you need to release stuck energy, and sometimes you need both. Her goal is to empower people to take back their own health and connect with their soul to become the most resilient versions of themselves. I know you are going to find so much to love about this episode. I really hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and let's get into the episode. Well, Lindsey, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
If someone said, "Who is Lindsey?" what are 3 words you would describe yourself as? I'm saying this question with the acknowledgement that I don't like labels and I don't like placing ourselves into boxes. So take that question as you will.
Well, I love this. And also, I've gone through a lot of personal transformations myself, even the past couple of weeks, but specifically the past couple of months. So it's kind of funny. I'm sure the answer I'm going to give you today would be drastically different than if you asked me in this past summer. So let's see, who am I? That is a good question. I think I'm trying to figure out who I am these days. Right now, if I had to come up with 3 words, I would say that I am compassionate, loving, and helpful. I'm always trying to help people. That's probably can be a little toxic if I'm trying to help people too much, but even since I was little, I just really want to help people. I think I've become a little bit more compassionate and loving. Maybe not so much before. People knew me before. I was very hard energy. So trying to, soften up a little bit.
Were there concrete events that led to this transformation, or was it an internal process? What has that journey looked like for you? And maybe what were 3 words that you would have described yourself like in the past?
I think it's a combination of both. There's concrete events and also just a lot of internal work. And I would say that there was events that I did internal work at. So it's kind of a mixture of both. I would say previously I would categorize myself as hardworking, leader, which I do feel like I still am, but I don't feel like I need to qualify that when you're asking me how do I represent myself, I don't feel like I need to be that masculine leader, everyone follow me. I kind of like to just lead by example. I don't think I would have a lot of confidence to even give myself some great characteristics. I'm not sure what the 3rd one would be, but there's just a lack of confidence in who I was. I don't think I knew who I was. So recently the biggest changes have been obviously deciding to leave my 9-to-5 corporate job, which just happened a couple months ago. That was a huge shift for me. And I was really hiding a lot too. I don't think I even realized it until recently. And I actually just had this mastermind call last night with a group of women who have become some of my best friends. And it was the most raw, true truthful version of myself that I even showed them. And I met them back in March. And it was like the best conversation we all had. We all felt like it was just so authentic as a group. And the biggest difference for me was that I actually shared how I was feeling in the past. And this is like years and years and years in the past, I would say up until recently, I would always like to try and paint a picture of I'm good on the outside, but like inside I was super confused or frustrated or not showing the authentic me on the inside and out. There was always an outside version you saw, and then internally in my head, it was something else going on. I didn't like to share maybe some of the challenges I was feeling towards people, anything that didn't seem, great to other people, anything that didn't seem polished, I didn't want to share. So being able to share like what I'm actually thinking in my head with other people has allowed that authentic connection to be cultivated, where before even people were like, oh, you're really cold. And I'm not that person, but I just didn't want to share anything. I didn't want to share any truths that were actually in my head for fear of judgment or what they would think, or, you name it. So I would say the job transition has been huge because I was in that hiding energy before, where I had started my business. I was doing all this energy work, which was super different from, I was an IT developer. So like complete night and day difference. But I didn't want anyone to find out I had a side business. I was scared that I was going to get in trouble. So it was all this energy that I kind of knew was hovering over me, but it wasn't until I got out of it did I realize how much I had taken it on in my day to day. So there was a lot of hiding. There was a lot of not being truthful and not like lying or anything, just not telling the whole truth. And, I'd share like 5% of it and the other 95% would stay in my head. So that's been a big shift. And just being able to tell people like what I'm about, who I am, what I do, and not feel like someone's going to come after me if I say that. That's been huge. I think the other thing is this summer, like I was saying earlier, there was an actual like event that led to a lot of internal transformation. There was an event that I went to. It was kind of like a retreat event, I would say, like in the summer. And this is one of those examples where like, as I was upgrading and releasing and transforming, my body was going through hell and back. And it was just like a complete breakdown. I had to drive to get there. I could barely drive to get there because of all the body things that were going on. I'll like spare you the details. It was like my body knew that I was going into this like giant transformation. It was one of those things I just kind of signed up for. You don't know like what you're going to get into. Even someone asked me like, what are you going to? I'm like, I don't know, this random weekend. And that's kind of how I sign up for things. I'm not the person that reads the sales page. I just see you, I see the person's energy and I sign up. I have no idea what I'm getting into. That was one of those times. So my body is like revolting. I like end up dragging myself there. And it's this 3-day full release of past emotions, past traumas, just everything that had been bottled up. It was like the biggest thing that I've ever done outside my comfort zone. Even people were like, what are you doing? Like, this is not you. I went by myself and I came out of that event a different person. I didn't think I would. Even in the middle of it, the person running it was like, you can claim if you want to be a different person from this day forward. And I was like, I don't want to be like all these other people and have this be the event that does it. But in reality, it was. I mean, did I have to like scream and cry and release everything in a room full of 300 people I didn't know to like get through my own shit? Yeah. Like that is how it happened. So I would say there's just a lot of things a lot of events and situations that I put myself in, specifically this past year, really, that allowed me to get out of my comfort zone, get out of my own way, stop feeling comfortable all the time, and drop this persona that I've had for so long and allow myself to have actual connections with people. And I think part of it is probably because I've had some not so great friendships in the past, things where I'm sure maybe not. You've had, similar things in the past, maybe when you were younger. I know that this was for me, especially like in middle school, high school. There's just the friend groups and the girls are just not nice to each other. There's a lot of mean girl energy. And I think I came from that was what I had experienced in a lot of my early friend groups. And so there was a lot of, you know, unseen trauma from opening up to people or having close friends that I didn't really acknowledge until I had to unravel it all and let it go. So those are the biggest things recently.
It's so interesting listening to you talk about this because I relate to a lot of it. And I also had the experience where I pushed down all my emotions and had to appear to everyone else like I was always good and always perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Always was just wanting to help other people, but I couldn't receive the help and I couldn't even acknowledge to others that I was struggling at any time. It took a lot to unravel that and to start to express my emotions and really acknowledge them and casually be able to admit them to people. But
Mm-hmm.
it's only led to deeper connections. Separating ourselves from that past identity and from these past labels that we put on ourselves has been so important. I'm curious if you ever had that kind of like identity crisis of like, who am I becoming? And am I able to let go of this past version of myself?
Oh, absolutely. Like right here, right now, this year. And I want to touch on something you just said before we go into this. But when you were saying like not being able to release your emotions or like starting to learn to do that, a lot of it that I found is like our society doesn't teach you to do that. I've told people before that in high school, like I used to have like an internal running track record of like all the days that I've had that I didn't cry in front of people because I was so proud of that. I was so proud to not show emotion in public to other people. And it's because there's so much shame around that. Now, I think there is a little bit more of a transition, at least in this space, I see it because everyone's talking about now releasing your emotions, tapping into the, so it is shifting. Maybe this is just in this space. I don't know about regular world. I've kind of like left regular world land. I don't know what they're saying out there. I should probably go tap back in and see what's going on. But there is a lot of shame around that. And it's unfortunate because then, there's people walking around not expressing their emotions, not expressing their feelings. And now they think there's something wrong with them. And that's not the case at all. It's just that they haven't felt anything in years, maybe decades. So I just wanted to like really capitalize on that because I feel like it's really important for people to realize and acknowledge that there shouldn't be any shame around it. And I think there is a big shift towards letting people feel that.
For those who care about human design, Lindsey and I are both manifesting generators 5-1. And I think that people with this 5 in their profile, this like save the day energy, but also people can really project things onto them, expect them to be the person who can always solve the problem and always is there to help. They can kind of turn in on themselves and keep a wall up because people have these expectations of them. And they want to kind of keep up appearances. And I have noticed a trend that for people who have that in their profile, they push things down and keep people at an arm's distance so that they can protect themselves. And learning how to find a better balance is really important.
Oh, absolutely. That's like story of my life. I would keep people at arm's distance. I would say the first person that I noticed that really started to break down those walls. And I'm sure there was other people, but this was like the most clear one for me is my now husband. When we were first started dating, he would ask me like, how are you feeling? Well, to me, no one had ever asked me that. And then come to find out later, he was asking me that because I wasn't sharing. I didn't realize that. I wasn't trying to like hide anything. That was just how I was. And that was kind of how I operated. I tried to keep myself very safe. So he would just like randomly ask, like, what are you thinking or how are you feeling? And I'm like, what? You want to know? And so that was the first person that really started to break it down that I noticed. That was probably like outside my family. I think when it was people inside my immediate family that would say that, I didn't see it so much as not opening up or pushing people away because I don't think I did that really in my internal family. It was more anybody outside my immediate family I would kind of keep at arm's length. So he was the first person that was outside of my immediate family that kind of was like trying to break down the walls and like get in, which I'm sure he's like, there are probably still walls to break down. He's like, I still don't know what you're thinking all the time. So sorry. But yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think you said something too about always wanting to help. And that is like again, story of my life. I mean, you heard me introduce myself, like I'm the helper, and I try and do it more in a healthy way, more so than a I can fix everyone's problems way. But it's hard. It's not easy. And you're asking about, have you had an identity crisis, or like what's going on now? I mean, that is where I'm at right now. I think I feel like I'm a little bit on the other side of kind of finally figuring out where I'm at. But specifically earlier in the year, this summer, even as ridiculous as having 2 Instagram accounts. I mean, I know that sounds like super ridiculous, but when I started my business, I think I officially decided to start it in 2021. I could not fathom putting what I wanted to share for my business on my personal account. So I came up with a business name of Soul Fam Wellness and immediately started an Instagram account. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to dump everything I want to share over here. If people want to follow me over here, they can do it, because, I didn't want to mess with people who are already following me on my personal account. Like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine, ruining their life or distracting their day with like sharing helpful information. That was like how I thought I was going to be a nuisance to them if I started sharing other things besides like random pictures. So at the time, I thought it was a great idea to start the separate account, which is not bad. But when you talk about like identity crisis, I stuck this other identity that I wanted to be and create over here on a totally separate social media account. So I was kind of like playing these, like tossing these two balls with like this personal account and this business account. And that worked really well until I realized that this persona or this person I had created on my business account was me. And now I have these two identities that I'm kind of juggling in the social world and trying to figure out. I mean, I still have both of them, so it's not like I've figured it out. But still, when people like ask, "Oh, what's your Instagram handle? How do I find you?" I'm like, "Which one do I share? Like, which one do I give out?" And trying to like merge the two and figure out how it works. I started out, I would say, when I say start out, I'm talking about like after I graduated college, like my very first job out of college. It's kind of where I'm thinking like, okay, becoming an adult on my own, like who am I as a person? I started out as this hardworking corporate America girl who was like determined to rise the ladder of corporate and become this leader and do all these great things. And the weird part was I did it super fast, to the point where in like 1 to 2 years, I was like leading other people, and I had just started. I was like right out of college, and I didn't do anything. I didn't think I did anything special. I was just hardworking and I was determined. So, I got to my goals really fast in that life. And then all of a sudden I realized I wasn't happy with it, and then had to pivot. So now I'm like, okay, well, I built this whole life, don't love it. Now let me pivot. But it was where I pivoted was so drastically different from where I started. Trying to bridge that gap is still kind of difficult because of who people knew who I was before and now who I've become. And to me, it's been this gradual change, but to them, they've only seen what I've shown, which is probably not a lot. So it has been challenging to figure out, how do I become myself internally, who I want to be, and share it externally? I'm still in the middle of it. I don't have a great answer, but to your question, yeah, there's been a lot of identity crises happening. One specifically right now.
Yeah, I have had a similar experience in the sense that I had no social media. I went completely off social media a couple of years ago and really took that on as part of my identity. And when I tuned in and realized that I wanted to go back on to share my business and use my voice again, it was so hard for me to accept. And it was also so hard for me to share it with other people. I was like, okay, this is something that I'm not really going to tell anyone about. And like, I don't want anyone actually finding it. But I was like, no, I do want people to find it because I want to help people. And it was really hard for me to accept that and to let people see it. And I still have the moment when people ask me what my social media is, where I pause. I'm like, oh, I tell people this now.
Yeah.
It's hard because I'm so for me, going on social media is so vulnerable, no matter what I'm sharing. In one sense, it feels so natural to me because it really does feel good. And on the other hand, it's like, this is so against everything I used to let myself do. So stepping into that is challenging.
Yeah, it is challenging. I mean, it made me feel safe to start that separate account because I felt like no one was looking at it. But I would even practice like going on the stories and like, just talking about something, whatever. Like I would do a breathwork session. It had nothing to do with my offers, had nothing to do with what I was offering. But at the time, it was just sharing some kind of health and wellness something. And I would go on and talk about it. And I think I would probably record this story like 4, 5, 6, 10 times before I would actually post it, because I would record it and then I would watch it and I hated it. So then I'd do it all over again. So, there has been like, it's hard, it's challenging, and it's a strange way. It's becoming more normal now, but from at least what we were taught like younger, it's a strange way to go out and like market yourself and putting yourself out there. You have no idea who's watching you. It doesn't seem like a lot of people. And then all of a sudden people just like know your life and know what's going on. I mean, I have that with other people who I follow and know of, and I'm like, oh, I know everything about you. So it is kind of weird. And yeah, I don't have it as much now, but when I first started and I would get a booking, I'd be like, oh no, like now I have to do it. Like I was terrified because I was like, wait, people found me? How did this happen? But like, you want them to find you, because as soon as I get into the sessions, I'm like, this is great. I can help you. Like, let me show you all these spots that you're missing, all your shadows. But it's that initial, oh my gosh, someone found me. Someone wants to like work with me, that like fear of, oh no, I'm out there, I'm seen. So it is this weird double-edged sword. I thought I was the only one that felt it. So I'm glad you do too.
Oh, I definitely feel it. You mentioned that a lot of the people in your life saw it as a drastic change because they didn't see the gradual inward process. But how did the people really close to you embrace that change? Like your husband, when you made this transition, what was his reaction to that?
I think he's still dealing with it. He'll be like, hey, be nice. I mean, it's very different. I grew up in a Catholic family. By the time I met him, I wasn't necessarily going to church or anything, but I have the Catholic background, and that was how I saw the world from a religious standpoint. He grew up Baptist, so he sees it a little differently, but similar enough. When we met, neither one of us, like I said, were going to church as far as like committing to that kind of part of our religion every week, but we were still close enough in religious beliefs that we could get on the same page. I bring up religion because I would say moving into a more spiritual mindset is really different, and it does require a shift in thought process from a religious standpoint. That I think is the biggest challenge, at least in our relationship and for him, because it's very non-traditional. And reading energy, using your intuition and reading energy and doing energy work, I think the Catholic background, I would say, kind of set me up on a little bit better trajectory for that to be an easier path. But I don't necessarily think that type of work or that type of belief is as accepted in something like the Baptist community. And that's at least from what I know. Now, I'm not saying that I know this from firsthand. This is all secondhand experience that I've heard. So don't quote me on that. It's just what I've heard. But I think it's still challenging for him in a way that he doesn't fully understand it. And I don't say that in a bad way, because, and he knows this, we've had this conversation. He doesn't totally understand it in a way that he could explain it to someone else. So he fully supports what I do. I tell him a lot, and he knows that I'm doing everything in the highest light, which is the most important thing to me. But he just doesn't fully understand it 100%. So it's still kind of something that he is working on, figuring out how to support me. And, he just supports me for who I am and for my business. But it is challenging. I started out with doing nutrition and became a nutritional therapy practitioner. Well, maybe doing some lifestyle changes, diet changes, eating differently, going through a supplement protocol is much more tangible. And it's a lot easier for him to grasp and understand that side. So then when I started going more into the energy work and intuitive space, it was a pretty big shift from tangible to completely non-tangible. And I think that's the biggest challenge for the people around me that don't see the non-tangible as something that's real. I would say my dad is the other one who doesn't totally understand it, and he still supports me, but it's not physical, it's not tangible to either one of them. So it is challenging, and I think both of them just support me. My mom as well, because she does this work not as a profession, but she definitely is very intuitive, does lots of energy work. She's very talented herself. So it's kind of funny that both of us have husbands who are like, well, we support you, but we have no idea what you're doing. At some point I just had to be okay with that, because for a while I was kind of upset about that. I just wanted both of them to completely understand it like I did, because it just kind of happened. I didn't have to try. I was taught this way. I was taught how to read energy. I was taught how to do energy work, and it just came to me so naturally. I didn't have to work at it. I didn't have to try to understand it. It was so natural. So I don't want to be in the business of trying to convince people, including the people around me who are closest to me. So I tell them mostly everything. I can't and I won't convince or try to make them understand something that they just don't. And there's timing in all of this. Like I said, my mom is incredibly talented herself. And just after her parents passed, my papa was her dad. And she was telling me that he came to her in some kind of meditation. She was working with someone else, and she was like, yeah, I like talked to papa and all this stuff, from an intuitive standpoint. And I was so jealous. I was like, wait, what? You can do this? And so seeing her do it, I knew it was possible. I didn't question what she was doing, but I didn't know how to do it myself. And she didn't know how to teach me. So she's just telling me these experiences. And then it wasn't until years later where I fall into the bucket of learning this stuff myself. And I'm like, oh, that's how you did it. But it wasn't the right time for me to actually do it or know how to do it when she was telling me these things, even though I was jealous of her actually doing them. So I feel this way too with like my dad and my husband. I don't know if either one of them will ever get to the point where they're experiencing it exactly how me and my mom are, reading energy, doing the same type of things, maybe not. But I do feel like as I keep going on with this work, there will be a greater level of understanding as I continue to do it, just because they're in my immediate circle. It just kind of happens. And I see shifts with people around me as I'm shifting, and I'm not trying to make them shift. It's just happening because they're so tightly connected energetically.
Yes. And I think that's something that holds a lot of people back from changing and from allowing themselves to evolve and grow is the fear of being misunderstood and the fear of people close to them not being able to accept it or being able to meet them where they're at. And we have to accept that we're not always going to be understood. And it's okay to be misunderstood. It's okay to be different. It's okay to see things in different ways. And I think the people who are meant to stay in our life and grow with us will seek to understand, or at least seek to accept our growth and where we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And that was something I had to learn. And that was something I had to learn with people really close to me, as someone as close to me as my husband. And it was just something, it was hard conversations that we had to have. And the biggest thing that has led me to continue to pursue this, even though there are people in my life that don't fully understand it, is the fact that I've been guided down this path in this, I don't even want to say strangely, but it is this divine way where I can't ignore what I've seen at this point. Other people have said, like, why don't you just go back to the nutrition? Like, that's more tangible. Like, you probably could get more clients that way. And I don't necessarily believe that I could get more clients that way, but that's the perception of maybe you're a little too weird if you are doing this energy work. Well, if you think that, you're probably not my client, and that's just the honest truth. And look, if you're open to this stuff and you're open to energy work and you're open to intuitive readings, then you are my person, and I will absolutely guide you and help you get there. But if you are so closed off to that, then there's other people who want to work with you, and it's just not me. And while I started my path on that direction, the doors that open afterwards, leading to energy work, leading to the emotional releases, leading to the intuitive readings that I've now landed on, I wasn't planning on doing any of that, but it came out of necessity. It just kind of showed up in my world unannounced, unplanned. I wasn't trying to call any of this in. And the results of the work are so powerful that I can't ignore that. I can't just shove that away in a closet and say, well, other people don't agree with this. Other people think it's weird. Other people don't like it. So I'm just not going to do it. I think probably in past lives, I've done a little bit of that. And I think maybe this is part of the reason why I have been put in this position where a lot of people around me don't necessarily understand what I'm doing, and I'm trying to present it in a way that is tangible to a point, because I do work with health challenges in the body, but I'm doing it in an energetic way, in an energy work way, where we are still bringing in the energy and connecting it with the body. So there is a tangible aspect to it. Some people don't always see it that way, but it's something I just can't ignore. I can't hide. So that's the reason why I've just continued to pursue this path, even though other people think differently.
That's why living in alignment with our intuition is so important, because otherwise we get so thrown off course by other people's voices and their path. Like maybe it's not your husband's or dad's path to work in this way or understand what you do. And if you were to let that stop you, you would stop yourself on your own path. Right. And if we all are able to listen to our intuition and allow that to guide us, then we can walk our own unique path with trust and confidence and not judge the person next to us walking their path.
There's other people I'm sure listening to this and they're like, well, I'm not on the intuitive path. Maybe my intuition tells me, like, I'm not in the intuitive reading path. My intuition tells me something different and it is tangible. Well, if that's the case, then that's your path. And I think a lot of the people around me, their intuition is telling them to go on a more tangible, physical path. And I say that like tangible, meaning like something that you can like touch and see. When you're doing energy work and intuition, you can't really touch it. You can't see it with your two eyes. So there are other people where maybe I don't necessarily understand what they're doing, but I'm going to support you if you're passionate about it. And you can feel people's passion and in what they're doing. And if they have passion for what they're doing, if they're following their intuition, no matter if I agree with it or understand it or not, you can feel the energy from that person. Now going through what I've gone through for myself and wanting to be supported, but really just being supported for what I'm doing, not having to have people understand it. I do have a little bit more compassion for people where I don't necessarily understand their work, but if I feel the passion from them, then I will always support the people that I love and trust and support, no matter what they're doing.
What was the core experience or beginning of your transition from tech world to spirituality, or to realizing that there was more for you to discover there?
So it did start a lot with my own health issues. And that's why I said I started with nutrition first. So I was in, corporate tech for, I think at that point it had been 4 or 5 years. But granted, even when I started right out of college on this job, I was having health challenges. It was just the fact that they continued to increase and increase and increase as the years went on. So there was always kind of something there, and I would just ignore it or like try and cover it up, and it would get worse. So it was really through my own health challenges where this started. I, of course, started down the traditional path of trying to figure things out. That, to no surprise, blew up in my face big time. And I turned to more of holistic alternative medicine. And it just became, it was almost like desperation. Like that's where I got to. It was kind of like, okay, this is working. Yeah, this is helping once I got to the more alternative stuff. But then it was like, no, there's still something here. Like this still doesn't feel right. Like I still don't feel good in my body. And really the biggest thing, and for me, the one symptom that really just sent me off and really just got me to that desperation point was having trouble breathing. And I was thinking about it the other day. I truly don't even know what the one thing was. I don't think there was one thing. I don't think there was one thing that really like fixed it or solved it or relieved it. Because at that point I was throwing the kitchen sink at everything. And so I wish I could go back and say like, this is what it was, or this is the one thing that did it. But all I know is that it got to a breaking point where, my husband, he was, I think my boyfriend or fiance at the time, I don't remember, but he was driving me to urgent care because I couldn't breathe. I like felt like I had this brick on top of my chest. And I drove myself to urgent care multiple times because I didn't know what it was. They're doing x-rays, gaslighting me, saying it's an anxiety attack. Well, sure, by the time that you can't breathe, the anxiety, coupled on top of it is not great. So yes, I'm sure there was an anxiety attack in there somewhere, but it's not what started it. There's something else. And I think that there was probably something related to heavy mold or some other toxins in there. Again, I can't pinpoint the exact thing, but I got to a point where I just straight up couldn't go to work, couldn't breathe, was just absolutely miserable. And my mom had somebody who was doing emotional releases for her remotely. And I just said, I'll try anything. I literally could care less what they do. I'll try anything. And so I think that was really the breaking point of going more towards energy work, because she did these emotional releases from afar. And I didn't even ask her what she was doing or care, because I started to feel some type of release and some type of relief from that pain and that discomfort that I was having in my chest for years. So once I started to get relief there, I started diving more and more and more into the alternative path to healing. And that was around the same time. This was like 2020, which everyone's life was blowing up, including mine. So my health was ready to crash. We just had to postpone a wedding that was planned for April of 2020. I'm sure you can all figure out how that went. Luckily, it all went great in July. So not to worry, but there was a lot of stress. So, there was stress coming at me from 50 angles. And I decided I don't really like my job. So let's just stack everything on top of each other, every stress you could possibly find, and stick it all on top of someone at once. So I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. I didn't know, but I knew I didn't want to do IT forever. So, went through all the different potential paths of doing something more in health. And that was always a passion of mine, even since I was younger. I always just like to help people. I was always someone that was very active, worked out a lot. I was always in I was in a community that was always seen as health driven in whatever I was doing. So it wasn't a huge stretch internally for me to get there. It was as I kept going on my own path to healing myself and figuring out why I still had some of these symptoms that felt like they were lingering, that I eventually was led to a more root cause approach of alternative health. And that's where I decided to say, okay, I'm really going in on this business I'm going to create, signed up to become a nutritional therapy practitioner, went down that road. Really, I saw it as a certification to get me to start actually working towards seeing clients, helping people. My initial thought was that I was going to then go on to read blood work and just do, kind of coaching calls for nutrition and blood work. During that stint of nutritional therapy training, I was introduced to a few energy work trainings. I started to get into energy work through a couple certifications. So then I kind of shifted my mindset and I was like, okay, I'll do some nutritional therapy coaching, I'll do some blood work, and then I'll do some energy work. That was kind of the direction I was headed. So as I'm finishing up my certification for nutritional therapy, I'm doing energy work, emotional releases, energy releases as well. Just kind of snowballed from there. I had zero intention of bringing intuition, energy readings, any of this stuff into my business at all. That's the real short and sweet version of it. And it's just kind of my business intentions have continued to change as I learned more.
I find that often it's the people who are pushed to their breaking point and pushed to that desperate phase who really seek to find something else. The universe tries to push a lot of people to that point, but some people can't take it on. So they numb or distract or find other ways to push it away. But if you're willing and able to let it lead you somewhere new, then you will have this whole transformation and really come back home to yourself in a new way. And it sounds like you really, without realizing, kind of let your intuition lead because you didn't know the next step. You were in that desperate space and just trying to take the step in front of you that you could see in that moment. I wonder if you have a daily practice with your intuition now and how it speaks to you and how you connect to it and how you foster that relationship with it.
What you said exactly is my intuition was guiding me. I didn't know that that was it at the time. It was just kind of, I trusted my feelings of excitement enough to go down these paths that didn't make a lot of logical sense. As far as my connection with my intuition today, I would say the biggest shift and the biggest difference that I notice is my decision making. And I'm not saying that I'm great at it, but before it would literally paralyze me to the point where like I couldn't make decisions. I didn't know how to make decisions. A lot of my decisions I was trying to make from either people pleasing for others or what did others expect me to do, or I was trying to figure out what was the right thing to do, when a lot of times there isn't a right and a wrong. It's just what's best for you or what's best for you in that moment, or what's the lesson that you need to learn. So a lot of being able to discern what feels like a decision out of fear and what feels like a decision out of intuition has been the biggest daily practice. And, you know, I'm still honorably someone who struggles with daily meditation. So I feel like anytime someone like says, "Hey, what's your daily ritual with your intuition?" or like, I immediately have shame around, "Oh gosh, I haven't meditated today." But that it doesn't have to be you sitting down in a chair meditating every day. That can absolutely be very helpful. And I find it incredibly helpful when I finally sit my ass down and do it. So don't get me wrong, it's the best. But being able to bring that intuition into your daily life to say, okay, everyone around me is saying that this is the logical way to go, but it just doesn't feel right. Like, I don't know how else to say it. And everyone's going to experience their intuition differently. But for me, especially when decision making, it's just, this feels right and this doesn't. And that's it. And if you can get to a place, and it's not like I'm not as clear about it every single time. There's some times where I'm super clear about something, and there's other times where I'm just not as clear. And I think it does take a lot of practice to be able to go against the grain, go against people's logic, and make decisions that feel good to you, which is the biggest thing that I've found in my life recently. I mean, logically, leaving my 9-to-5 job recently was probably the most illogical thing I could have done. But if I had to like sit through one more meditation with my higher self where it was like, please quit, like I couldn't. So there's a lot of times where it's going to lead you to something that feels risky. That risk is something that a lot of people might not take, but your higher self can see what you actually need. And for me, tapping into my intuition is what I believe tapping into my higher self, my soul self, more of the spirit side. And that doesn't always make your ego happy.
We're taught in society to be strategic and logical and to think things through and to always have a plan. And if it doesn't make sense or we can't explain why we're doing it, then we shouldn't do it. But that is not how our intuition works. And shifting from logic to feeling is everything, and really letting, especially for you, having a sacral authority as your intuition in human design, letting that gut response in the moment guide you, and that pull towards something, that inner knowing, that's all you need to know. And you don't need to explain it. You don't need to rationalize it. It just is.
Yeah, but that is a great point. And while I know very little about human design. I know enough that, someone has told me that I'm a sacral authority, and knowing that I make decisions with that gut instinct is super important, because it's like, okay, well, I have this feeling when I'm trying to make a decision, but then knowing that that is truly how I make decisions on a soul level, like that is my blueprint on a human design level, that is really helpful, because not everybody makes decisions in that way. So from, like you were saying, a human design aspect, it is really helpful to know things like that, because you can, yes, use your intuition, but you're also knowing this is how my blueprint is meant to make decisions, or whatever the case may be. But it helps you confirm the inner knowing, because I don't know how the other authorities are, how they make decisions. So that is absolutely your expertise. But if I didn't have that gut feeling, like that wasn't how I was meant to make decisions, and I was trying to act like someone who has that sacral authority and use my gut instinct, it probably wouldn't feel as good, and it would probably feel like more of forcing it. So while I know very little, knowing that is super helpful, and anyone who doesn't know their authority should definitely look into human design, at least at the slight bit. It's very helpful.
Going back to something you were touching on before around meditation, I'm a huge proponent of meditation. I love it so much. It helps me so much. And at the same time, I'm an even bigger encourager of people doing what feels right for them and what feels accessible for them in each moment. Everyone connects in different ways. And I don't think that the prerequisite to being spiritual or to getting to know ourselves is meditation, or just the typical way of sitting on a cushion in silence.
Depending on how your brain works too, it might feel really challenging at the beginning, and you might not even be able to get to a calm enough spot to really have meditation be effective at all. And, the times where I feel like sitting in a chair just feels like the absolute last thing I could do, the two things that really help me to connect on just like a day-to-day basis without having to carve out more time is, one, walks with my dog. I don't bring headphones. I don't bring any music or anything. It's just me, him, and the sky. And the amount of downloads and information I get just by quieting my mind and just walking are incredible. And the other thing that I would have never thought of is driving. Now, I caveat this with, I do it in a very specific drive. I'm going to the gym. It takes me 10 minutes, and there's only one way to get there. And it is like so autopilot. Like, I do not think I could possibly screw it up. Now, I'm obviously like very conscious still driving, but the amount of like downloads and information I get just while driving, because I don't turn the music on, I just leave the radio completely off. So I'm just sitting there with me and my thoughts, or really my spiritual connection. And that doesn't take me any extra time. It's just that it is wild, those 10 minutes, how much information I get from my higher self while just sitting there. And the second I turn on music, I mean, it's gone, completely gone. So if there are times where you feel like, okay, maybe I could lessen the distractions while I'm doing this very autopilot thing, some people that might even be cooking. And I used to turn on music and stuff. Now, obviously, if you're following a recipe, you're trying to like focus a little bit more, but if it's something that's very like autopilot, your body could do it in its sleep. And being able to take that time for your body to just do the thing that you're doing and allow your mind or your spirit to really connect is so helpful. And it takes the stress out of, I need to sit down and meditate for 10 minutes. Now, granted, the times that I carve out that time, it is super, super helpful, but that might not be every day.
I do think the key is the no distractions, just having some sort of time in your day where you are just with yourself. So I love those tips. What is something you wish people talked about more, or that you wish you were able to talk about more?
Biggest thing is how our bodies are energy. Like, we are energetic beings, and looking at our body from a full picture perspective is something that I will talk about till I'm old and gray. A lot of the things I communicate are always kind of coming from a health standpoint, because that's where my brain is at. But anytime you have any physical issue in the traditional Western way, they're like, okay, you have something with your ankle. Like, what's wrong with your ankle, your foot? And they just like zero in on that spot, where really that might not be the root of the problem. And so getting people to understand that our entire being is energy, which means you are energy, everything around you is energy, and you interact with this world in an energetic standpoint. And just because you have a sore on your ankle doesn't mean that that specific spot is the root of the problem. And the amount of times that I've seen people not expressing or experiencing their own emotions, and then that energy getting stuck in their body and causing problems is wild. And then that is so far-fetched for people to understand. So by looking at our body and our person and our health as in a full picture perspective, like we're not leaving out body parts when we're looking at health. When I'm doing anything in my practice, it is the full body, the full picture. And it's also physical, it's emotional, it's mental, and it's spiritual. All of those factors have to come into play to be able to see the full picture. If you're leaving any of those out, you're missing something. A lot of times, I think when we're younger, we're just taught we're these humans walking around the earth. I mean, the thought that we're not connected to something greater than this planet or just these humans walking around this earth is like kind of wild. There's a lot of disconnection in that way of thought. There's not a lot of thought about how we interact with the world, how we interact with ourselves on a spirit level and on a physical level. So really, I just want people to know that everything that you think, everything that you say, everything that you do, and the person that you are here and in connection with your spirit is all connected, whether you can see it or not. Yes, these things on my desk may be tangible, but the thoughts going around my head are just as real, even though you can't see them.
I think accepting that we are more than just our bodies, we are energetic and constantly exchanging energy, it forces us to take more responsibility for ourselves, and not in a scary way, in a way that allows us to connect to ourselves, to know ourselves, to get curious and question. And say we wake up and our neck hurts, instead of instantly reaching for some pills or something that will stuff that down, or a doctor that will just take it away, it allows us to get curious and to really understand ourselves on that deeper level that a lot of people disconnect from.
Yeah, but you said a big thing there is taking responsibility. And a lot of people love to put blame and put responsibility on someone else. This is someone else's problem. Someone else needs to fix this. It has nothing to do with what I did. I'm perfect. And, that word perfect is such a double-edged sword. In one hand, I believe nobody is perfect. In the other hand, I believe everybody is. But it's not that someone else is going to come fix you. You have to take responsibility for yourself, how you're feeling, what you're experiencing. That's a big weight for people. They like to give the responsibility away so that they don't have to accept how they're feeling is because of how they are in the world. And that's just a very raw truth that a lot of people aren't totally willing to face.
And I think it's because people can't accept themselves, because they're afraid of what they'll learn about themselves or what they'll have to accept about themselves if they acknowledge that, and if they take responsibility, and if they start to live intentionally versus on autopilot.
And it can be challenging. I mean, I totally get not wanting to face a lot of things that you've tried to hide or cover up. It's not easy. But the more that you do that and the more that you take responsibility for who you are, or maybe who you want to become, like you've got to get through the stuff that you're hiding.
And that brings me to my next question, which is, what is something that you used to feel shame about, or that you used to hide and that you have now learned to love or accept about yourself?
I'm not sure I've totally accepted it. We're on our way. I can be very bold and honest with people. There's a level of tough love that I like to give to anybody around me. And now obviously that I have been more vocal about my business. They're like, oh, I have this issue with my elbow. Like, how do I fix it? And I'm not one to sugarcoat things. Like, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think, exactly how I feel recently anyways. I'm not sure I was like that before, but I don't have the same viewpoints or thoughts as most people. And I noticed before that I would very much sugarcoat things or not say details about things. I would even notice, I'm probably doing it now on accident, but I talk in this like code. Like I don't share details. And I'm still like working through that. I think before it was a lot of shame for like taking up space and being that person in the room that everyone was listening to and sharing details. And sharing details for me is being authentic and truthful. And I think before I was, well, if I don't share the details of everything, then I can still kind of hide and I can still keep the persona that everyone thinks about me without giving them the real information. So I don't think I have fully figured it out or moved through it, but I would say just sharing my truth of what I actually feel and not trying to cover it up and make it sound pretty.
We need every type of person in this world. We all come here as our unique individual selves, and we are made on purpose, and we're meant to express ourselves completely authentically on purpose. And if we shut ourselves down or hide or quiet ourselves because we are afraid of what people will think, or we want to be perceived in a specific way, we're not allowing ourselves to be who we are made to be in this lifetime. This is in my opinion. And I feel that we're actually doing people a disservice, because if you're meant to show up here bold and honest and to speak truth in a direct fashion to people, but then you don't do that, you're not impacting them in the way that you're meant to. And then they're not going to have the experience that they're meant to have. And you never know how you're going to impact people. Even someone could respond negatively, let's say, in that moment, but then a month later, they're like, oh my God, what Lindsey said is so right, or something like that. You know what I mean? And I think if we trust who we are and trust that if we show up in alignment and in integrity and in our truth, that the rest will unfold as it's meant to, then we can show up in confidence.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's challenging, especially if you're someone that's more in that people pleasing energy. You don't want to make someone upset. So like you were saying, you may say something that someone doesn't necessarily agree with in the moment, but then, a couple of weeks or a month later, they go back to what you said and they were like, oh, I get it now. Or, oh, now it makes sense. I'm not upset about it. But if you were trying to avoid any kind of confrontation and just making sure you were saying things that they agreed with and liked, you wouldn't have said that thing that gave them that aha moment. And that's challenging because I'm someone that doesn't love confrontation. Like that's not what I go after every day. But it does, I think, start with you being confident in yourself. And then you won't care what other people say or how they respond. And that's challenging. That's so much easier said than done because one, at least I feel myself changing absolutely almost like weekly these days. So trying to figure out who you are inside and then portraying that same thing externally is very challenging. Like it's not easy. So if you're listening to us say this and you're like, yeah, well, easier said than done. No, I hear you. Like, you get it. It's not easy. But the more you practice it, the easier it does become. If you just keep avoiding it, which is what I did for a long time, you're not practicing being authentic. You're not practicing sharing your truth. And, there are going to be a couple times where you're like, okay, I'm going to practice today. And like something really what feels like dumb comes out or just really, not authentic or you didn't sound very clear. And it's going to be a process. It's going to be a lesson for you to figure out how to communicate what is your authentic truth. But if you just keep avoiding the uncomfortable, you're never going to learn. You're never going to get there.
I think that comes back to the importance of those moments of quiet and checking in with yourself and assessing, who am I today? does my life still feel aligned for me today? Does showing up in this way still feel aligned for me today? And allowing it to be messy and imperfect, and allowing yourself to make mistakes, and to be honest with yourself. Say you showed up in one way and it didn't feel good, then having that moment where you acknowledge that and accept that, and then try again the next moment. Just having that commitment to ourselves to be as authentic as we can in each moment. That's where the integration can happen.
Yeah. And I will say, I want to point out there's a difference between evaluating yourself as to how you showed up in a certain situation, like kind of doing a self-review and saying, okay, did I feel authentic, or did that feel like not so great? How do I shift? There's a difference between that and beating yourself up for how you showed up, or, oh my gosh, I didn't communicate exactly how I wanted to today, or I didn't feel like I was on today. Whatever it may be, there's a difference between that evaluation and like super self-criticism, because that self-criticism is going to keep you just frustrated with how you're showing up or who you are. And you're not going to learn from it, because you're going to be just in this constant internal spiral.
I think that coming at it all with a level of self-acceptance and curiosity is so important. Living intuitively wild means living dedicated to your true, authentic self, no matter what. How do you live intuitively wild?
I love your name. It's so perfect, and how you describe it is absolutely beautiful. I think I probably mentioned it a little bit, but I would say these days for how I live intuitively wild is listening to my intuition and listening to what feels good and what doesn't. When these decisions involve other people, you can't totally just rely on yourself to make decisions. So if you are someone that is living with others or have a family, you're like, oh, that sounds really nice, but I have all these other people around me. And I think being able to discern what's best for you and everyone around you without people pleasing is a really big dance. Being able to still stay true to myself and fighting for the times where I need to put myself first is the best way that I can continue to stay living in my intuition and living intuitively wild. Because, I talked a lot about just not everyone not agreeing with what I do or someone else does. That may be the same thing on a day-to-day level, where someone may think you should be doing XYZ with your day and you feel the exact opposite. So being able to, plan out your day, make your decisions, and live in a way that feels good and doesn't feel like there's a lot of resistance.
That connects to what we were talking about before, about trusting that what's right for you and what feels in integrity for you is in the greatest good for everyone. So please share how people can work with you, what your offerings are, what you're most excited about with your work, and anything else on your mind.
Absolutely. So on Instagram, you can find me at Soul Fam Wellness. And my website is the same thing, www.soulfamwellness. All my offerings are on there. My signature offering is called the Soul Embodiment Reading. And that is a 1-hour session. I do a reading on your health challenge, and then we do an intuitive healing. It is experienced for you as a guided meditation. And we are just essentially moving energy, clearing out anything that's not serving you, doing any kind of activations that you may need, but it is all built around your health challenge. So this could be something that's physical, emotional, mental, any kind of health challenge you feel like you would like some more answers on, or you feel like maybe the help you've been receiving hasn't gotten you to where you would like to be. So this is a complete, intuition-led session. I do have a few other offerings if you're someone that's more into supplements, remedy protocols, things like that. You can find that all on my website. But the soul embodiment reading is really for someone that has either done the supplement route or really wants to add on to whatever healing protocols and modalities that you're already working with, and you just need some extra support, some extra info, and wanting to be seen and held on an energetic level. So that is all on my website. You can find it there. Definitely send me a DM on Instagram. Come say hi. I would love to chat. And if you have any questions, you see my offers, you don't know which one would be best fit for you, come and send me a DM and we can chat.
I'm so excited for people to connect with you. I'm so excited about the work you're doing and your offerings, especially the signature offering that you have. The work you're doing is so important, and I'm just really grateful to have connected with you and to have had you on the podcast. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And I absolutely love the work you're doing as well. And your podcast is absolutely incredible and inspirational. So thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Intuitively Wild, the podcast. I hope it helped deepen your connection to yourself, sparked some insights, and inspired you to live intuitively wild. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with others and leave a rating and review. And please reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. I will see you next time for more magic.